The evening wind crossed the prairie like a tired him, brushing against the tall, brittle grass, as though trying to remember the touch of spring. Caleb rode through it with the quiet patience of a man who had long accepted that life rarely moved at the pace of his desires. His horse, a steady brown mare with more sense than temper, carried him along the dirt path that glowed faintly beneath the fading sun. In that soft amber light, he looked like a figure carved from the land itself, 33 years old, shoulders shaped by years of ranch work, eyes that held more storms than he ever spoke of. He was on his way to fix a door that had broken loose after last night's wind, nothing more, nothing less, and he expected nothing unusual waiting for him. Caleb was the kind of man who approached life with the quiet acceptance of someone who had learned not to expect miracles. But he did believe in duty. He believed in fixing what he could, holding together what others had abandoned, and saying little about what weighed on his heart. The cabin came into view at the edge of a lonely stretch of land where no houses stood for miles. Its shape was slanted slightly, like a tired old friend leaning on its own shadow. Caleb stepped off his horse, the dust settling around his boots, and listened. Usually the place held a faint hum, wind against windows, loose boards shifting. But tonight it breathed differently. Too still, too quiet. Silence pressed against him like a held breath. The old door hung crooked from its hinges, creaking as though whispering for help. He laid a hand on the wood, assessing the damage. A simple job, if he kept focused. But there was something off, something in the air that made him stand still longer than usual. He pushed the door slowly. The hinges groaned. The room inside was dark, except for a faint sliver of light filtering through a broken window. Dust floated in the air like unsettled memories. Then he heard it, a small shivering sound, barely audible. Not the rustle of an animal, not the shift of boards. Something human. Caleb took a step inside, quiet as a whisper, letting his eyes adjust. The sound came again, softer this time, a breath that trembled, a heartbeat trying not to be heard. In the far corner, curled like a wounded fawn, sat a young woman, 25 by the soft shape of her features, though hardship had carved shadows beneath her eyes. Her clothes were dusty, her hair tangled around her face as though it had tried to shield her from the world. Her hands trembled slightly, resting against her stomach as if trying to hold in the hunger that had hollowed her. She looked up, fear flashing through her like a spark in the dark. She didn't speak. She only stared at him with a mixture of shame and exhaustion so deep it made Caleb swallow hard. He didn't move closer immediately. He had seen broken things before, tools, fences, lives, but this was different. There was a fragility in her stillness, as though the slightest wrong movement might shatter her. Caleb lowered his voice into the gentlest version of itself, rough from disuse, yet soft with intention. He told her he meant no harm, that he wasn't here to drive her out. She drew in a sharp breath at the sound of his voice, as if the kindness in it shocked her more than anger ever could. When she finally attempted to shift, her arm buckled under her weight. She winced. Caleb stepped forward, but slowly, giving her time to see he wasn't a threat. Hunger had drained her strength until she could barely lift her head. Her mouth parted as if she wanted to apologize for being there, for taking space, for existing. But no words came out. Only silence. A silence filled with stories she did not yet trust to tell. Caleb crouched down, not too close, and studied her with a quiet understanding. He did not ask how long she had been here. He could read the answer in her trembling. A day without food looked one way, 2 days another. Her body carried the heavy stillness of someone on the edge of collapse. He gently asked for her name. After a moment, her lips barely moved as she whispered, "Anne." A simple name, but the way she said it, so soft and fragile, made it feel like something precious. She lowered her gaze, as if ashamed to offer even that. Caleb noticed the empty water bucket in the corner, the untouched wood stove, the faint marks in the dust where she had tried to stand but failed. She had been fighting for her survival in silence, and losing. He felt something shift inside him, not pity, not obligation, but a quiet recognition. He knew hunger. He knew loneliness. He knew what it was like to be forgotten. and something in her eyes told him she had been forgotten long before she ended up in this cabin. He stood up slowly, as if moving through water, and let a breath escape him. The decision came to him not like a spark, but like a truth he had carried for years without naming. He reached for the doorframe, steadying himself, then spoke to her with a firmness coated in warmth. "Gather your things," he said softly. "You'll stay at my home." Her eyes widened, confusion rising like mist. She looked at him as though he had spoken in a language she had never heard. No one had offered her safety in a long time, perhaps ever, and tried to argue, her voice barely a thread, saying she didn't want to trouble anyone, that she could manage a little longer. But her body betrayed her as she tried to stand. Her legs gave out, and she stumbled. Caleb caught her, his hands gentle but sure, holding her upright without gripping too tight. Her entire body was trembling. He steadied her for a moment, long enough for her to breathe, then adjusted her weight carefully, and leaned against him with reluctance, with shame, with desperation. And yet there was something else too, permission. She allowed herself to be supported. He walked her outside, guiding her step by slow step. The mare stood patiently as Caleb lifted and carefully onto the saddle, making sure she was wrapped in his coat. She clutched the fabric, as though it was the first warmth she had felt in days. The ride to his home was steady, unhurried, each hoofbeat carrying her closer to something she didn't yet understand. Caleb spoke little, but he looked back every few moments to make sure she was still upright, still breathing evenly, still with him. She met his eyes once, briefly, and in that fleeting moment she saw something in him. Strength, yes, but also a deep, unspoken softness. His home was small, quiet, and touched by the warmth of a man who repaired things even when no one asked him to. When he carried, and inside, she felt the shift immediately. A place lived in by kindness feels different. The air feels safer somehow. The shadows settle instead of threatening. He helped her sit by the fire. Her fingers, cold to the bone, slowly thawed in the glow. He prepared her water first, then broth warmed with careful patience. She tried to drink, but her hands shook too much. He steadied the cup for her, his touch trembling just slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She felt seen, and she didn't know how to handle it. As the fire crackled, and finally found words, she told him she hadn't meant to trespass. She had been turned away elsewhere, told she wasn't needed, wasn't wanted. She had walked until her strength betrayed her, stayed in that empty cabin hoping she could find work the next day, only to collapse again and again. She spoke in broken pieces, stopping often to breathe. Caleb listened, his silence a harbor. He didn't interrupt. He didn't question. He simply let her speak, letting her story bloom at its own pace. Night deepened. Shadows moved like soft hands across the walls, and tried to rise, insisting she had taken enough of his time, that she should leave in the morning. But as she pushed herself up, her knees failed. The world tilted. Caleb caught her once more, but this time he held her a little closer, as if something inside him refused to let her fall ever again. When she looked up at him, breath trembling, she saw something change in his eyes, a truth rising unplanned. He spoke her name, not loudly, but with the weight of someone who had repeated it silently in his mind since the moment he heard it. He told her he cared. The words were simple, but they carried more than honesty. They carried revelation. He didn't know when it happened, only that the moment he saw her in that corner, alone and starving, something fragile in him had stirred, something long buried beneath years of silence and routine. He confessed that her presence made his home feel less like a shelter and more like a place with meaning. He told her she deserved gentleness, deserved safety, deserved someone to stand beside her. His voice trembled only once, but she heard it, every word sinking into the empty spaces inside her, and didn't speak at first. Tears welled slowly, as if they'd been waiting behind her ribs for years. She whispered that she didn't understand why he was being kind. Caleb brushed a loose strand of hair from her face with the lightest touch, as though afraid she would break. "Maybe," he murmured, "because someone should have been kind to you long ago." Her tears fell then, soft and steady, and she let her head rest against his chest, allowing herself to be held. allowing herself to believe that safety might not be a dream meant for others. For the first time in years, she let someone gather the pieces of her heart. And in that moment, under the trembling firelight, a quiet miracle unfolded. Two lonely lives, meeting exactly where the world had almost broken them.